You woke up today already worrying about money, your future, what people think, your looks, your job, your next move. And guess what? None of those thoughts changed your reality. They just stole your peace. You're not broken. You're conditioned to believe that worry equals control. But what if I told you that worry is the most unproductive addiction society rewards you for? Let's break that loop, because this is exactly why you worry too much. One of the biggest lies we've bought into without even realizing it is that worry equals control. That somehow, if we just think a little harder, analyze a little deeper, prepare for every single possible outcome, then we'll finally feel calm, clear, and in command. But let's be honest, has that ever really worked? Has overthinking ever given you the peace you were hoping for? Or did it just take you deeper into a mental spiral you couldn't shut off? Worry is sneaky. It wears the mask of logic. It shows up sounding responsible, like, I'm just trying to be prepared, or I need to think this through. But let me tell you something. There's a massive difference between thinking through a situation and ruminating over it until it rots your confidence. One leads to action. The other traps you in mental quicksand. See, your brain is a survival machine. It's always scanning for threats, always trying to predict the next thing that could go wrong. It's doing its job, but the problem is it doesn't know when to stop. You get one small worry, maybe about a bill, a conversation, a result, and your brain goes, cool, let's multiply that by 50 and turn it into a 3-hour anxiety marathon. And we let it because it feels like we're solving something, but we're not. We're spinning. And here's the kicker: worrying feels productive. It gives us the illusion of progress. You feel like you're doing something by thinking about it, running scenarios, building worst case outcomes like a mental architect. But what you're really doing is mentally pacing, like walking back and forth in a locked room, thinking that maybe if you walk hard enough, the door will open. The truth: most of us aren't addicted to thinking, we're addicted to worrying. It gives us the illusion of safety. If I think about it enough, it won't surprise me. If I prepare for the worst, I won't be hurt. But that's not preparation. That's self-punishment. You're rehearsing pain. You're living tomorrow's fear today. And 9 times out of 10, the thing you're worrying about never even happens. So what are you left with? A nervous system that's fried, a heart that's heavy, and a moment you've missed. Let's get real here. When was the last time you were fully present while you were worrying? You weren't with the people you love. You weren't in your body. You weren't connected to anything except the noise in your head. And that's what worry steals: your life one thought at a time. And I get it. We think, if I don't worry, I'll be careless. But listen, if peace is not the absence of planning, it's the absence of panic. You can be intentional without being anxious. You can prepare without obsessing. You can care without carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. Here's a little truth bomb: control is an illusion. Always has been. The only real control you have is over your R's response. Not over other people, not outcomes, not the past,
not the future.
just you right now. But worry pulls your focus into places you can't influence and out of the only moment you actually have can. You don't need more control. You need more trust. Trust in yourself. Trust in your ability to adapt. Trust that even if the worst does happen, and sometimes it does, you'll still find a way through, because you've made it this far, haven't you? You've survived everything you once thought you couldn't. And yet here you are, still standing, still breathing, still building. That says more about your strength than your worries ever will. So the next time worry starts whispering, you need to think about this more. Ask yourself, is this helpful or is this just noise? Because there's a big difference between being proactive and being paralyzed. And worry wants you paralyzed. Let's stop feeding that illusion. Let's stop mistaking mental chaos for clarity, because not every thought deserves your attention, and not every fear deserves your future. Most people don't realize this, but your brain was never designed to make you happy. It was designed to keep you alive. That's it. Survival, not peace, not fulfillment, not joy, just survival. And once you understand that, a lot of your anxiety starts to make sense. Your brain's number one job is to scan for danger. It's like a 24/7 security guard, constantly watching for anything that could go wrong. That's why you find yourself replaying conversations from last week, obsessing over what someone might think of you, or panicking about something that hasn't even happened yet. It's not because you're weak. It's not because you're broken. It's because your brain is doing what it's been programmed to do for thousands of years: keep you alert, keep you cautious, and keep you safe. But here's the problem. We're no longer running from tigers. We're not foraging in forests. We live in a world where most of the threats aren't physical anymore. They're emotional, they're social, they're mental, and your brain hasn't caught up. So now, instead of scanning for predators, it's scanning for judgment. Instead of looking for shelter, it's looking for certainty. And because life is uncertain and people are unpredictable and the world moves fast, your brain never really shuts off. It treats every unanswered text, every missed call, every awkward silence like a potential threat. And what do you get in return? Worry, anxiety, sleepless nights. a loop that doesn't end. But just because your brain is wired to worry doesn't mean you have to obey it. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness behind them. And the moment you realize that, truly realize it, you begin to take your power back. Think about it. How often do you assume that every thought you have is true just because you had it? But the brain throws out thoughts all day long, some helpful, some irrational, some downright ridiculous. And yet we latch onto the negative ones like they're gospel. What if I mess up? What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? That's the survival brain talking. That's the ancient programming kicking in. But you don't have to feed it. Let me be clear, it's not your fault. This is how we've been wired for generations. The brain remembers pain more than joy. That's evolutionary biology. If your ancestors forgot where the berries were, it was inconvenient. If they forgot where the bear was, it was fatal. So what got remembered more? The fear, the failure, the danger, and that same bias lives in you today. So of course you worry more than you celebrate. Of course you brace for impact before you trust the good. That's your system doing what it was trained to do. But here's where things shift. You're not living in a jungle. You're living in a society that tells you to smile on the outside and panic on the inside. You're navigating deadlines, opinions, comparison, and chaos, all with a nervous system that still thinks it's hunting dinner. This is why you feel exhausted, not because you're doing too little, but because you're doing too much mentally. You're trying to survive in a world your brain was never built for. But the good news, you can train it. You can rewire it. You can teach it that not every discomfort is danger and not every unknown is a threat. Start small. Breathe when your mind races. Pause before reacting. Question the thought instead of assuming it. Ask yourself, is this survival or is this just habit? Because the moment you begin to challenge that old programming, it loses its grip. You are not here to survive every moment like it's a battlefield. You're here to live fully, freely. And yes, fear will show up. That's natural. But you don't have to build your home inside it. Let fear knock on the door, but don't invite it in for dinner. Because when you understand your brain's true purpose, you stop blaming yourself for being anxious and you start building the awareness that breaks the cycle. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you sat in total silence, no distractions, no phone, no background noise, and just existed for a moment? For most people, the answer is either I can't remember or why would I do that? And that right there is part of the problem. We live in a world so loud, so overstimulating, so constantly connected that silence feels almost uncomfortable. Stillness feels unnatural. But here's the catch. Your nervous system desperately needs it. You're bombarded every single day. Notifications, texts, headlines, deadlines. Your brain is juggling a million things, decisions, pressures, comparisons, expectations. From the moment you open your eyes, you're flooded with information. And you may think you're handling it fine, but inside, your system is overloaded. And when your mind doesn't get space to process, to breathe, it starts to panic. That's what worry often is, the byproduct of mental overstimulation that has nowhere to go. Your mind wasn't built to run like this. There's a reason anxiety rates are higher than they've ever been, despite all the tools and technology we have at our fingertips. We've traded clarity for convenience. We've substituted reflection with reaction, and we've lost the space between stimulus and response, the very space where peace lives. Let's get real. You wake up, check your phone before you even get out of bed. You scroll, consume, compare, then it's emails, meetings, news, more scrolling, maybe a podcast while you're driving, music while you work, Netflix to unwind, TikTok to fall asleep. And through all of it, your brain never gets a break. Even when your body is resting, your mind is still sprinting. And here's where worry creeps in, because when your brain is this overstimulated, it starts creating threats where none exist. Small things start to feel massive. A minor comment becomes a personal attack. A delay feels like rejection. You're not reacting to the moment. You're reacting to the 1,000 other unprocessed moments that came before it. It's like trying to hear a whisper in a hurricane. The noise drowns out the truth. This is why so many people say, I don't even know why I'm anxious. I just am. That's not weakness. That's overload. Your mind is full, but it's not focused. And a full mind without direction leads to worry because it has to do something with all that energy. So it loops, it ruminates. It picks apart the past and obsesses over the future just to release some of the pressure. But pressure needs release valves, not more pressure. You don't solve mental chaos by adding more input. You solve it by creating space, stillness, a moment of quiet to let your mind catch up with your life. Because the truth is, most people aren't worried because something is wrong. They're worried because they're never still long enough to know what's right. You have to create space. You have to protect it like your sanity depends on it, because it does. That means turning off the noise sometimes. That means getting comfortable with boredom. It means taking 10 minutes just to breathe, to observe, to let your mind settle without trying to force it. And yes, at first, it will feel uncomfortable. That's normal. We've been conditioned to believe that if we're not doing, we're wasting time. But what if your stillness is actually the most productive thing you do all day? When you stop pouring gasoline on a burning mind, the fire begins to die down. You start to think clearer. You start to feel more in control, not because you solved everything, but because you're no longer drowning in the noise. You become less reactive, less fragile, more grounded. Worry begins to fade, not because your life is perfect, but because your system is finally getting the space it's been screaming for. We don't need more stimulation. We need more simplicity. And in a world that never stops shouting, the boldest move you can make is to sit in silence and listen. Let's talk about something that no one really wants to admit: how many of us secretly wear our stress like a badge of honor. Think about it. Somewhere along the line, we started to confuse being anxious with being responsible. We started to believe that if we're not constantly worried, constantly pushing, constantly overwhelmed, we must not be doing enough. That if we're calm, we must be slacking. If we're peaceful, we must be falling behind. And that belief, it's dangerous. It's been normalized, even glorified, to be busy and anxious all the time. The hustle culture tells you to grind harder, sleep less, sacrifice more. And if you're not drowning in deadlines or worried sick about your goals, maybe you're not really serious. And we bought it. We bought this idea that productivity has to come at the cost of our mental health, that the only way to matter is to be constantly in motion, constantly achieving, constantly anxious. But here's the truth. Chronic anxiety isn't ambition. It's not drive. It's a warning sign. It's your body telling you that your nervous system is running on fumes. It's your mind sending out smoke signals that you've crossed the line from motivation into self-destruction. And yet we ignore it. We medicate it with more coffee, more to-do lists, more distractions. We tell ourselves, I'll slow down after this deadline. I'll take care of myself once things settle down. But things never settle down because you never taught yourself how to. Somewhere along the way, you learned that being relaxed meant being unprepared. That worrying was a form of care. If I worry, that means I'm being responsible. But no, worry doesn't make you responsible. Action does. Worry is just running in place. It's emotional burnout disguised as effort. What makes this worse is how deeply we attach our identity to our output. We start believing that we are our work, that we are our achievements. So when we're not grinding, when we're not hustling, when we're not stressed out of our minds, we feel guilty, like we're not enough, like we're wasting time. But here's the thing. Your worth isn't measured by your anxiety levels. Peace doesn't mean you don't care. It means you trust yourself enough to handle life without self-destruction. You don't have to be in a constant state of tension to be productive. In fact, the most powerful version of you isn't the one that's frantically juggling everything. It's the one that's focused, grounded, and intentional. You can care deeply without letting it consume you. You can want to succeed without letting fear drive the wheel. Let me tell you something else most people don't hear enough. Rest is not laziness. Clarity is not weakness. You don't have to run yourself into the ground to prove that you matter. In fact, when you learn to lead from calm instead of chaos, you actually make better decisions. You show up more powerfully. You create from a place of alignment, not anxiety. But it takes unlearning. It takes stepping back and asking yourself, why do I feel guilty when I'm not worried? Who taught me that peace is a threat? Why do I feel safer in stress than I do in stillness? You see, a lot of us are so used to operating in a state of fight or flight that we think it's normal. We don't even realize how burnt out we are until we try to slow down, and then we get uncomfortable like something's wrong. But nothing's wrong. That's your nervous system trying to recalibrate. That's healing. That's what balance feels like when you haven't had it in a long time. So don't confuse worry with work. Don't mistake burnout for bravery. You don't need to suffer to succeed. You don't need to feel anxious to feel worthy. You just need to give yourself permission to live from a place of peace, because you're not here to prove yourself through panic. You're here to build something meaningful without losing yourself in the process. We live in a world that teaches us how to chase, how to hold on, how to grip tighter when things feel uncertain. From the time we're young, we're taught to strive, to push, to cling to goals, people, outcomes, like our worth depends on it. And maybe that helped in some ways. Maybe it built resilience. Maybe it taught you how to endure, but no one ever really taught you how to let go. And that's one of the biggest reasons you worry so much. Letting go is a skill, one that very few people are taught, and even fewer are encouraged to practice. Because it sounds passive, right? Weak, like giving up, but it's not. In fact, letting go is one of the most emotionally intelligent, mentally strong things you can ever do. It takes far more strength to release than it does to hold on. Anyone can grip tighter, but not everyone can surrender what's weighing them down. You've probably spent years training your mind to control, to plan, to manage, to fix. You've been conditioned to believe that if you just try hard enough, care hard enough, think long enough, everything will go exactly the way you want it to. And when it doesn't, the brain kicks into overdrive, worrying, spinning, trying to find an angle you missed. You hold on tighter to the idea, to the memory, to the hope. But the more you hold, the heavier it gets. Here's what we don't talk about enough sometimes. The reason you're exhausted isn't because you're doing too much. It's because you're carrying too much old fears. past rejections, expectations, disappointments. You've been lugging all of it into the present, trying to move forward while still gripping what already happened or what might happen. That's the weight that breaks you, not the moment itself. You see, worry isn't always about the future. A lot of the time, it's unprocessed baggage from the past, things you haven't forgiven, questions that were never answered, moments you never got closure on. And instead of letting them pass through you, you let them build a home inside you. So now, anytime something uncertain shows up, your mind goes back to those old wounds and says, let's not feel that again. Let's control everything so we're never hurt again. And suddenly your entire emotional life becomes about protection, not peace. But you can't protect yourself from everything. That's not living, that's surviving, and you weren't born to survive every moment in fear of what might go wrong. You were meant to grow, to change, to evolve, and growth requires letting go. You can't step into the new while clinging to the old. You can't hold joy in one hand while gripping fear in the other. At some point, you have to choose what to carry. The hardest part, we often hold on because we're scared of the space that letting go creates. The unknown, the silence, the void. Because if we release the thing we've been obsessing over, the person, the outcome, the fear, then what's left? And the answer is what's left is clarity, energy, freedom. The ability to focus on what actually matters instead of what you wish would change. But letting go doesn't mean pretending you don't care. It means caring from a healthy distance. It means trusting that you don't need to control everything to feel safe, that your peace doesn't have to be earned through struggle, that your worth isn't measured by your ability to fix every detail. Start practicing with the small things. The traffic jam you can't control, the text that hasn't been returned, the plan that fell through. Breathe, release, refocus. And over time, you'll start to notice that your nervous system doesn't flare up as easily. Your thoughts become quieter. Your reactions become slower. You stop panicking every time life shifts because you've built the muscle to adapt, not just to control. Letting go isn't a one-time thing. It's a lifestyle, a daily choice, a mindset of surrender, not weakness, but wisdom, the wisdom to know what's yours to carry and what's not. Because the truth is, not everything that weighs you down is meant to be held. Most people think the goal is to stop worrying altogether, to somehow shut it off like a switch and never feel anxious again. But that's not how this works. That's not how the mind works. You can't kill worry. You can't bury it deep enough or ignore it hard enough to make it disappear. And honestly, trying to silence it completely only makes it louder. The more you resist it, the more it insists. That's why it keeps coming back, because you haven't listened to it with the right kind of attention. You see, worry doesn't show up to ruin your life. It shows up to protect you. It's your brain's way of saying, hey, something feels uncertain and I want to keep you safe. That's it. It's not always accurate and it's definitely not always helpful, but it's not your enemy. The problem isn't that you worry. It's that you don't understand your worry. You judge it, you fear it, you try to suppress it. But worry is just a message. And if you never take time to read that message, it keeps knocking louder, more aggressively, more frequently. Think about it like this: worry is like a check engine light on your car. It doesn't always mean something is broken. It might just mean you need to slow down and look under the hood. But what most of us do is cover the light with a piece of tape and keep driving. We ignore it. We distract ourselves. We pretend we're fine, and then we wonder why we crash later. The truth is, the real work is learning how to observe your worry without letting it control you, to sit with it without being swallowed by it, to say, okay, I see you. Why are you here? What are you trying to tell me? That shift from judgment to curiosity is where your power comes back, because worry feeds off fear, but curiosity dissolves fear. When you're curious, you're no longer the victim of your thoughts. You're the witness. And from that place, you get to decide what's worth believing and what's just mental noise. Here's the part that surprises people. When you stop trying to push worry away and start understanding it, it actually starts to lose its grip, because most of what worry needs is just to be acknowledged. Not indulged, not obeyed, just acknowledged. That tiny act of saying, I notice that I'm feeling anxious right now, instead of pretending you're fine or forcing yourself to be positive, creates enough emotional space for clarity to slip in. And with clarity comes choice. You realize you don't have to spiral. You don't have to follow every scary thought your brain throws at you. You don't have to believe everything you think. You can choose to act from presence instead of panic. But that choice only exists when you stop fighting the worry and start meeting it with awareness. Now, that doesn't mean you let worry run the show. It means you let it speak. Then you decide if it's telling the truth. You don't hand over the wheel just because anxiety showed up. You listen, you learn, and then you lead. Because here's the difference between people who are consumed by worry and people who are guided by wisdom. One reacts automatically, the other responds intentionally. And yes, this takes practice, especially if your default has always been to overthink, overanalyze, overprepare. But every time you pause and observe instead of react, you're retraining your brain. You're creating a new mental habit, one that says, I can feel worried and still be calm. I can acknowledge fear and still choose peace. I don't have to wait for the worry to go away before I move forward. That's what emotional maturity looks like. Not the absence of fear, but the ability to keep moving with it beside you, not driving, just riding along. And eventually, when worry sees that you're not giving it the same power, it stops showing up with the same intensity because you've changed the relationship. Worry doesn't need to be eliminated. It needs to be understood. And once you understand it, you stop being afraid of it. And when you stop being afraid of it, you stop letting it run your life. So here we are, after everything we've unpacked, how your mind tricks you with illusions of control, how your ancient wiring confuses safety with stress, how the overstimulation of today's world turns peace into a distant memory, how anxiety is often worn like a trophy, how we never learn the strength it takes to let go, and how worry isn't something to kill, but something to understand. There's one truth that rises above it all. You're not broken. You're just running an outdated system in a world that keeps pulling you out of yourself. But the good news is this: you have the power to rewrite that code, not all at once, not perfectly, but gradually, with intention, with awareness, with courage. You don't need to control every outcome. You don't need to be constantly anxious to prove you care. You don't need to carry everything. You don't need to fight your worry like it's an enemy. You just need to meet yourself where you are, with honesty, with compassion, with the willingness to slow down, to listen, to let go, and to trust that you are capable of facing life, not from a place of fear, but from a place of clarity and strength. Because the goal isn't to never worry again. The goal is to not let worry own you anymore. That's how you take your power back.